morning, everybody. Jim Feiss and Hank Goldberg here in Las Vegas, and we should say snowy Las Vegas. Unbelievable, Hank, how much snow we had here. You just moved here. You probably never thought you'd see snow, did you?
Not here, no.
Yeah, we had two snowstorms this week, and I have 7 inches in my backyard. Some areas got 8. It's pretty incredible. I live at the highest point in Las Vegas, but other parts of the city got it as well. Cold again today, but Hank, we're on to a really big weekend of college basketball. Pro basketball came back last night after their break. And, of course, we got the AAF football coming into week 3. Anything you'd like to talk about today?
Well, we could start with AAF. I guess Utah finally got a home game. I'm curious to see if Nelson has another good game for San Diego. Spurrier's team is the best, clearly, in Orlando. And I'm not putting a lot of money into that league right now. There's not too much scoring going on except for Spurrier's team. Sims played for Atlanta last week, didn't look too good. But I'm curious to see how Utah does at home. I think they got a pretty decent team, actually, and they're going to get better. That's all for that.
Well, that's the Salt Lake Stallions, as they're known. They're getting 4.5 points from Arizona Hotshots, in case anybody else wants to know that. There are 4 games this weekend, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, if you want to tune in for those games. Now, we talk about college hoops. We've got a lot of great games. Of course, this week we saw sort of a tragedy with Zion Williamson going down, the shoe breaking, and his knees getting tweaked. I don't know to what degree that is. I guess we won't know that until his rehab is done.
It's a grade 1 sprain.
What do you think? Do you think he's going to come back?
Yeah. It's week to week. I think he'll come back. Grade 1 is not terrible. And he'll be able to play, probably when conference tournaments come around.
There's a lot of people out there, and I'm not giving an opinion on this, but there's a lot of people out there that thinks he should shut it down and just go take the money.
I don't think he's in that camp. I think he wants to play.
Well, if he does, I hope he stays healthy. I hope they all stay healthy. You hate to see anybody lose their career.
Well, this isn't a surgical prospect situation. It was a freak thing. Shoe broke 30 seconds into the game. That really killed him. They got a tough game this week against Syracuse. Syracuse is playing very well right now, but Syracuse has its own tragic situation with Jim Boeheim being in the auto accident that resulted in a fatality. He's not being charged with anything. The guy who he hit was he was trying to avoid another car, and the guy was on the side of the road with his own car broken down. It's a real freak thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what Coach Boeheim's status is this weekend. So that's a factor in that game. But there are a lot of good games besides that one. Just looking over the schedule, Mississippi State, South Carolina is a good game. South Carolina's playing pretty well right now under Frank Martin. Frank's a good coach. Kansas has Texas Tech. That's a very good game. Nevada had a disappointing performance in their last game. See if they can bounce back. St. John's playing well. They're playing Seton Hall. St. John's. Chris Mullen's doing a good job with that team. And they've got a couple of nice players. It's North Carolina, Florida State. Be an interesting game. Kansas State, Oklahoma State.
Yeah, if
there's some good conference games. Marquette is playing well.
Marquette's at Providence. You're probably going to see Marquette about a 4 or 5 point favorite in that game. They are playing extremely well. You got, Virginia, of course, is going to play Louisville. Virginia will probably go into that game as a road favorite, maybe about 4 or something around those numbers. That's another big team. You got LSU. LSU and Tennessee is a very interesting game to think about. LSU just lost at home to Florida. Tennessee lost big time to Kentucky. These teams look. Tennessee may be power rate out a little bit better than LSU, but the game is at LSU. I can't see any number on this game. I've got to think the game will be about pick'em, don't you?
Well, Tennessee's a little down right now, and LSU, who had a little letdown the other night, LSU at home may even be a slight favorite in that game.
Like anytime it looks like it might be picked, you could see either side favored probably.
But I think Florida really surprised me the way they beat LSU.
Yeah, that was a big game. I mean, they went in there and they took the game to overtime and they beat them in overtime. You get some I don't know. You get some dark horse teams that might show up. I mean. Minnesota, a lot of people were on Minnesota last night. They didn't do well. They did not cover. They lost the game by 9, taking 5.5.
Yeah, I had the other side in that game. So yeah. I did okay there, but I didn't have a great night last night.
You got teams like these teams like, look at a team like a mid-major, Central Michigan. They're 18-8 on the season. They've covered their last 7 games. They're on the road at Ball State. Ball will probably be about 5 or 6 point favorite. 4.5 to 5.5, maybe, in that range. There's a lot of very interesting games. The Iowa State, they kind of lost their way the other night, and they're at Texas Christian. Baylor put up a big game the other night and beat Iowa State on the road. And they're at home against West Virginia. They'll be a sizable favorite in that game, but West Virginia has been playing absolutely awful. They've covered 1 of their last 8 games, 0-4 streak. There's a lot of good. This is going to be a great Saturday. Creighton is at home to Georgetown, which just knocked off Villanova. They're about equal type of teams, but Creighton is probably going to be a little bit of a home favorite, probably in the 5 point range against Georgetown. Creighton is amazing. They've played some. They don't know how to finish games off. I mean, they have lost games in the last 10, 15, 30 seconds repeatedly, making mistakes, which is really surprising for that team. They're usually better coached than that. But there's a lot of good stuff going on. It's going to be a great weekend. You do have the AAF football, but it's really college basketball time. And then the NBA is really down to their last 20 to 25 games before the playoffs start. So that's going to start heating up as well.
Well, there was a couple of good games last night. The Celtics played a nail biter, against Milwaukee, and a lot of people thought Milwaukee was going to beat them easily. That didn't happen. And out west, Sacramento gave the the big favorite out there. They go all the way.
Warriors.
Sacramento played a hell of a game against them. Although the game went over, there were a lot of points scored. There was some question as to there would be a lot of scoring in that game coming off the layoff, but it was no problem. And it wound up a 2-point game.
Yeah, they scored 148 points in that game. But you know, the funny thing is, the total on the game was 239, so they only went over by about, 9 points. And the Lakers made a huge comeback last night. They fouled out James Harden in the game, and the Lakers made a big comeback they won the fourth quarter 28-16 to win by 5 as a 3-point dog. Milwaukee did win at home. They did not cover the 6-point line. Portland went on the road. They beat Brooklyn. They beat them pretty handily by 14 on the road. Of course, Phoenix and Cleveland, two terribly bottom-rung teams. But Cleveland won that game pretty handily by 13. And the Miami-Philadelphia game, Philadelphia won by 4 at home, did not cover. Miami stayed close. They covered the number. So, you're going to start seeing these teams really start to put up a lot of energy now because they're really down to the end, and they're going to start playing hard. A team in college basketball has been actually a money team, Hofstra. They had to go to overtime last night to playing Towson as a 14-point favorite, and in overtime, Hofstra beat them 9-0, which is, you don't see that too often. There's some really interesting stuff going on. We've got a lot of work over this weekend, Hank.
Oh, that happens when there's a mismatch that winds up closer than it should be, and if they wind up in overtime, the favorite wakes up, and outscore them. And Hofstra is a much better team than Towson, and they just didn't show early and wound up in a real ball game. But Hofstra's a pretty good club.
They certainly are. They got a great record, and they've been making a lot of people a lot of money. There's going to be some really good stuff, and hopefully we get some of these also, these mid-majors, these lower-rung teams that are actually pretty good, like Furman, like Wofford, teams that are really good that should get into the big dance, in my opinion, rather than some team that's like 6-12 in their own conference, but they get in anyway. I'd like to see some of these smaller schools that play pretty good basketball get in.
Well, I think it'll happen. Teams like Murray State, and, Furman,
yes,
and Hofstra, some of those teams have a good chance to get in.
I sure hope they do. Of course, California last night, boy, I'll tell you, talk about a bad basketball team. This team has played terrible all year long. They almost lost by 20 last night. Actually, they did lose by 20. They lost by 25 to Arizona. So that's a bad team this year, real bad team. And this West Coast basketball.
Well, the big interest this weekend is going to be on the Duke-Syracuse game and how Duke can play without their star guy, and what's going to happen with Syracuse. It's a shame. Syracuse was coming off a big victory, and they're playing very well right now. And, I feel terrible for Boeheim, what he goes through. Of course, worse for the fatality in that accident. But there'll be big interest in that game. And, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame's an interesting game. Virginia Tech is playing pretty well right now. And Purdue has kind of tailed off a little bit. So, we'll see what's going on out west. Boy, Gonzaga, they didn't cover by a half a point last night. but they're such a big favorite. They were 28.5-point favorite, and but the game went over. But they're a scoring machine.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about them losing that one player? Do you think they've made up for that? Because he probably won't come back. But Tilly, I think his name is. But they're a powerhouse. I mean, they're as good as anybody, if not better than. I mean, the one knock against them is their schedule, but boy, they're awfully good.
Well, they played a couple of tough teams early and beat them, so they don't have to apologize for their schedule.
There's a team down in Texas that's 25-1. Nobody talks about this team as being legitimate. I don't know why. They have beaten some good schools. They're 25-1. We're talking about the University of Houston, and when you're 25-1 and you're carrying a power rating that's pretty far up there in the 90s, I think they should be talked about a little bit more.
Houston is a high-profile basketball program, and they have been for a few years since the old coach from the Big East went down there and really raised the level of play. And since then, they've been able to recruit, and they've been pretty good every year.
Yeah, they really have. Now, Hank, I think one of the biggest games on the card is this Kansas-Texas Tech game. Kansas has turned it around. They're playing much better now than they lost a couple players, and they were down because of the injuries, and they've remolded their team. And Bill Self, I think, has done a pretty good job putting them back into position to play better, and they're doing better now. Texas Tech has a really good head coach. They play very tough defense. They're fundamentally a very, very strong team. These teams are both 20-win teams. Well, Texas Tech's won 21, but they're both in the 20s. And recently, you really see these teams have really turned it around. Kansas is on a 3-game winning streak, although they played a couple teams where they were pretty big favorites. But in Texas Tech is coming off of winning 6 of their last 7, losing only. They lost 1 game on the road to Kansas as a 4.5-point dog. They lost by 16. So this is a re-hookup of those 2 teams from a month ago, or almost a month ago. But they're playing at Texas Tech, and their head coach Beard has done a hell of a job with this club. I don't think they've lost a home team. They have not lost a home game in conference so far this year.
Yeah, well, Kansas, since the 2 young guards started playing after they overcame the injuries that they had, Self has really brought that team along. He's a good coach.
You got 2 good coaches, 2 good teams. That's a game. That's the one game I think I'd like to actually watch. You talked about Reno, Nevada Reno losing the other night to San Diego State. That's always a tough spot. They got to play. They're playing at home against Fresno this week. That's going to be a good game. Nevada Reno will be about a 12-point favorite in that game. Hank, I know you're really tied up today and not feeling all that well. How about we hook up again on Monday? We'll do another podcast. In the meantime, have a great weekend and feel better.
You too, Jim. Thanks.
Thank you, Hank. Bye-bye.